The first question for this week was, how do the articles define Islamophobia?
Well, you can
go ahead, Casey.
Okay, so I actually highlighted one of the definitions because it's talked about in a couple of different places, but it said that it's the irrational fear of those who are Muslim or those who appear to be Muslim.
Right. Yeah, that's what I had too. An irrational fear or a prejudice toward Muslim people or those who appear to be Muslim.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I thought that appear to be was pretty interesting because I was thinking I immediately flashed to like Cat Stevens, who I think is like Greek and Swedish, but converted to Islam, and people don't seem to have a problem with that. He's visually white. He has a Western name or had a Western name, and people seem totally copacetic with that. But if you look Muslim, even if you're not, I mean, think post 9/11, like it's that appearance of being Muslim that seems actually more important than whether somebody actually is.
Absolutely, and that kind of caught me on the test, the quiz that we did, because it asked for the definition, or and it just said the irrational fear of people who are Muslim. It didn't say anything about appear to be, so I put it as false because, and then he marked it right later. But it's like, well,
some of the like stats that they included, kind of after defining it, really kind of surprising about like 46% of people have a negative view of Islam, and just like the word Muslim is connected to like violence, hatred, terror, like word association. It was like all really negative, and
yes,
like the actual stats after that, I was like, whoa.
Mm-hmm. So I can, so I as you know, I live in Kuwait. My husband is Muslim, so it's actually true. All those, like where I live in the Bible Belt in Oklahoma, it is true. When I came there, people were like, "Don't you dare marry a Muslim man." I said I wouldn't marry a Muslim man. Moved here, found my true love. He happens to be Muslim, and now when I go back, I get a lot of flack. But then, like my family met him, and now my dad, who was racist. He actually now will fight for Muslims, and he left the church because they said something bad about me marrying Muslim, so he left that church. So now he advocates for it because now he knows that all the media bringing up about how we are those words terrorists and all those things is what they feel. He now knows that is not true at all. So it's really just shows to me too how ignorant, how really important it is for a multicultural education, for kids to have it, because we are so, sorry if I hurt anyone's feelings, but I feel like in America we're very ignorant. When it comes, not everyone, but a lot of people are, when it comes to different religions and races and things like that.
Yeah, we're not as exposed to it because we're a very insular culture. Thaddius? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Anthony.
I know some of the numbers that were given are reading. I'm sorry.
Keep going.
I know some of the numbers that were given in the reading, like 2/3 Americans know little or nothing about Islam. I think the ignorance gives that off as far as not knowing anything about the religion. So we take the perception that the world sees them as, and we run with it. But we really need to get to know the Islamic religion and know the good part of the religion. This was about the Islamic religion that we don't know about as Americans. Those who are
absolutely
about it. Yeah.
There's actually a lot of things that are the same. Going on to that, so then we've been talking about stats. Another question was what was it saying about how Arab American parents involved in their child's education?
This one I saw a lot this last year. The school I was at had a very large refugee population from like Ethiopia, Eritrea, and South Sudan. So we had a lot of Muslim kids, and a lot of them are pretty recent immigrants and refugees. And so I thought, like, the Al-Khatib and Al-Hadidi article really resonated with that one. Just in the different paradigm shift of, like, Arab parents are often really involved at home,
Yes.
but we don't see it. And American teachers are used to American parents being visibly involved. And our definition of involved is, like, volunteering in the classroom, or bringing cupcakes, or coming to parent-teacher conferences and being, like, really, really in your face about their kids' education. But a lot of the parents that I worked with were super involved at home. And if I could get in touch with them, like, they wanted stuff to work on at home, and they wanted extra information, and they wanted, like, stuff that they could do independently with their kids, because they spent so much time on education at the dinner table. And so that was kind of eye-opening, just like, there's a completely different paradigm about how you can be involved in your kids' education. And so those first parent-teacher conferences were like, oh, okay, shift. But that, just that teachers and parents have different perceptions of this. And the discussion of what, like, the Arab mothers are into for that was really kind of cool.
Laura, you mentioned, like, you said, like, if you can get in contact with them. One of the things I got to me was they talked about the communication styles and how, as a teacher, the easiest thing is, like, shoot an email, right? Like, takes like at least my time. I mean, I'll do it, but I don't particularly enjoy talking on the phone. Like, I'd rather send an email if I could. But it says that they, like, Arab American families, when they communicate, they depend highly on body language and facial expression and, like, the timing of silence, and all of those things are lost when you
email.
Yes. Yeah. Email or even a phone call, you can't read that body language. So, kind of the easy way out for teachers is a quick phone call or an email, but really to connect with non-white, traditional American parents who might need one-on-one personal interaction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which suggests to me back to school nights are going to be a huge deal.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, and for me, who I've been teaching in an Arab or Muslim, all of those things. Well, another thing I noticed why it's better, especially to talk with them in person, is because their language barrier, they take things very literal. I'm going to give you a quick story. I had a student who was misbehaving, sent a note to the dad saying he was putting his hands on other kids because he was running down the halls, hitting them constantly. The dad came back. He said he was going to get a lawyer on me, and I could never talk to this kid again. Because in his culture, putting your hands means I was saying his son was gay. And he was very offended. And so that was one thing I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to start calling and talking in person, because through email, what I was writing was not what he was translating, or was not what he was comprehending because of the way we speak. Even my husband, they don't get idioms. They don't get any of that stuff because it's not in their language.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, one thing that I thought was interesting, and I don't remember which of the articles it was, but it was talking about the different roles that students have to play just in their lives, and one of them as a translator for their parents if their parents don't speak English. And so I haven't had much of that in my experience, but I think that would be so interesting for the teacher trying to communicate with parents, especially if you need to use the student as the in-between, that at times, who knows what the message will be by the time it gets to the parents. So I don't know, I feel like schools really need to do a better job of talking to teachers about how to communicate with parents, because I know I received no training, no instruction whatsoever when it comes to this area.
In case that's really interesting, I had a situation this year where a kid was telling his mom that, he was doing fine, and he wasn't coming to class, but he was working with another teacher, and he was, like, showing her, like, someone else's grades, and, like, we finally had a conference on, like, your kid, like, is failing. She's like, no, he's not. And I was like, yeah. But again, it was like, the kid was basically being the translator for home, telling his mom exactly what he wanted to hear. Right. Necessarily.
Yeah.
What was actually happening. Yeah.
And Thaddius, I thought I heard you saying something.
No, I was just agreeing. I've worked in that type of setting as well, where the student has to step in, the mediator between the parent and the teacher, And so you never know how things will work out because of the language barrier. So I've experienced that also in teaching settings. So it can be challenging, very challenging. So I agree that we need more training on that.
All right, so then shifting into refugee children. And the question is, in what ways do refugee children experience schooling?
This is not something that I really have much experience in, but just what I read in the article, it talked about a lot of these kids, or many of these kids, not a lot, some, don't have experience with formal schooling in the first place because their lives have been in such upheaval for so long that coming to a formal schooling setting is a big culture change for them. And then it talked about the students being, many of them are of color, so they come in to all of these already negative perceptions and prejudices and these little microaggressions and things that you wouldn't necessarily think about, or at least I, as a white girl or a white-looking girl, I wouldn't think about those things, and I found that interesting.
Yeah. My next door neighbor teacher was great at this last year. We had a pretty big contingent of like Rohingya refugees too, and he was from Bhutan and was a refugee himself, and his teaching experience was teaching in refugee camps for 20 years.
Wow.
And then he came to America and was a translator for 7 years, and last year was his first year as a certified classroom teacher. And it was like magic watching him work, especially with kids that were, coming in, like the Fruha Amflar and Rojas article was talking about, like, they're coming in with war-related stress and PTSD, and like our district had counselors available for that and they did that part pretty well. But watching him do the emotional navigation in the classroom and watching him, he had an accent, but his English was good, but watching him use his translator skills to put things visually and to do like these little, I don't even know how to call them, like these little timeouts, but this like one-to-one emotional management for kids that haven't ever had to sit for an hour and a half straight in a classroom speaking English and not making any noise. And so like that was really cool to watch him just be so incredibly conscious of the stressors that those kids were bringing into the room.
Laura, that makes me think of, in the article, I don't remember which one, but it talked about the difference between doing well and feeling well. And a lot of times it's like, oh, the kid's doing great, like they're getting it, but like how are they doing emotionally? Or how are they coping with, coming into a totally different system? Like, yeah, maybe they're doing fine in school, academically, whatever. But again, that difference between doing well and feeling well, I think that's kind of what you were hitting on with that example.
In one of the articles, it talked about all immigrant children, regardless of whether they're refugees or not, that they're kind of judged on their success by how quickly they're able to adapt to the educational system and the language and everything. But Laura, what you were talking about with the emotional aspect of it, with refugee children, if they're coming from like horrible circumstances that have been through so much, that's like another obstacle for them to get through. And I don't know, I feel like that would just give negative perceptions of those students if they're like slow to adapt, not really doing well. Then you're not taking into account all the emotional things that are coming with it and the reason for why they're not doing well, because you can't really expect them to as quickly as other students who like maybe come from like really good circumstances, have experiences in America, and can just jump right in. It's very different for these kids.
And just to add on to what was said, I know a lot of the teachers, they use the Asian minority as the top shelf. I think that was said in the article, as the model minority, and they use other minorities, such as certain refugees. They compare them to the Asians, so they put the Asians at the top of the list. And so I think that's a perception that a lot of people have.
Right.
When we have this type of setting going into the classroom.
All right. Our next question is, what is studies, and how can it be used in racially diverse and predominantly white schools?
We started this discussion talking about ignorance, especially with the Islamophobia idea, that we have so much of our fear and prejudice of other religions or other races is a fundamental lack of understanding, or just plain misinterpretation and misunderstanding, whether on purpose or not. So to me, this is so much opportunity in terms of deliberate education of ourselves and our students to avoid that. I think which one was it? The DOTS article that had like a curriculum tailored to the cultural backgrounds of the students. Like,
yes,
that's something that we're often missing. I don't remember which article had it, but it was talking about assimilation as erasure. And so I think this is part of combating that.
And what I thought was interesting in the article by the same, the De Los Rios article, the demographic reality part, when it was talking about how, you know, we're all doing this, where, you know, the curriculum is based on, you know, white supremacy. Yet in the biggest cities, it says that there's only 5% of white kids are even in those cities. And so we're teaching them, you know, so it's predominantly minorities, and we're teaching them or forcing down this white supremacy type of education.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And then we wonder why they drop out and all this. And then I started thinking about the video that the guy was presenting, and how several articles are about Arizona, how they've had ethnic studies, and then they saw great significance and in their scores and their academics, and the kids are now, there was a high percentage of kids graduating high school, and then they cut it because of the senators or the governors, because they felt like what did he say that they felt like we were doing something, I can't remember.
They said it was like, basically they thought it was like racist. They thought it was like, the kids were gonna overthrow the government.
Yeah.
And I was like, what?
Yeah, banning these books, and it's like, that's just so.
It honestly makes me think back to slavery and why we said they can't read and write because we don't want them to be knowledgeable. Well, I feel like that's what we're doing with these kids. We're trying to make them worldly. Yeah, once again, we're going back what we did hundreds of years ago, and obviously, it doesn't work.
It doesn't work, and it's all fear-based, you know.
Yeah.
We're looking at worrying that somebody's going to take us over, and it's, you know, the white base, if you will, is going to get toppled by others.
There was a quote.
Yeah, I think that superintendent and that senator that was in that article dealing with Arizona, I think they use a smoke screen of the word individualism to try to hide the cultural effect that is needed in Arizona. So I think the word individualism was used in that article. I can't remember exactly if they used that per se, but I knew it was said they use individualism per se, the cultural part of to get rid of that, what Ansley was saying earlier.
Yeah.
One of the articles talked quite a bit about the Common Core state standards and then the assessments used to test those standards. And so they said that those standards and the language used and everything on the assessments is very much whitewashed and just about white culture, not really any culture whatsoever. So that makes me think that if people are using this as a justification to not teach culturally relevant things because it doesn't go with the standards, that then you're asking teachers to change their curriculum and the things that they're using instead of changing the standards and changing the testing.
Yeah, it was in that last article by Urrieta and Machado Casas talking about white streaming. Yeah, and that bothered me. It's the official and unofficial text, ideologies, and discourse is used in U.S. schools that are founded on the practices, principles, morals, and values of white supremacy. And it leaves out everybody else, which is most of the United States at this point.
And then part of that question that Ansley asked was like, how can it be used in both like racially diverse and white schools? And there was a quote in one of the articles that talked about basically how in order to be successful in today's society, you have to be like a global citizen, like you have to have global awareness. And and it says, one of the quotes, I can't remember where it was from, but it says a critically educated population is a non-negotiable for the strength of our multicultural democracy and national character. So again, like even if it is a predominantly white school, ethnic studies is still really important for those students to then be successful when they,
get out into the
real world. Yeah. So.
Right.
All right. So now we're going to move into the classroom type things. So the first one is, what are ways that teachers can engage in discussions on Islamophobia?
This is such a tough one.
Yeah.
It really is.
I wrote a little note, and I think that this was mentioned somewhere in the readings, that like religion is such a touchy topic in classrooms because teachers feel like we're not allowed to talk about it at all. But then at the same time, I feel like teachers themselves don't have the knowledge about culture and religion to be able to talk about it, in a way that they actually know what they're talking about. So I know for me, I would definitely like to talk about different cultures, talk about Islam and things like that, but I feel like I myself don't have the knowledge to be able to lead a discussion when it comes to these things. That's kind of my initial thought just when it comes to that.
Yeah, I've had experience about the religion part, having that in the classroom. And I can tell you that's a very touchy subject. Even I had a black class. We were talking about the different religions among Afro-Americans. We started talking about the Baptists, Jehovah's Witness, and it really lady upset what she called her mother. And she came up to the school.
Oh, goodness.
So religion can be a very touchy subject in the classroom. But I think we do need training on that. Really do.
All right. So now let's go into what are some future considerations for teachers who are unsure of how to address religious and language discrimination in school. I think this goes back to what everyone's been saying, is teachers have to be trained in any of this, because we are ignorant of most other cultures and religions, and we have to have some type of training to be, not saying you have to know everything, but maybe even give us teaching, like sentence starters or stems for us to branch in what is a positive way of bringing up discussions with our class, or what are some positive ways if you see that the discussion's about to go south, how can we fix it and make it go in a more positive direction?
And I think part of it is just saying something. I mean, I know a lot of us don't have formal training in telling, hey, a discussion's about to go south and that kind of stuff, and we do need that. But when we say nothing, that's implicit agreement or implicit permission. Yep. And if our job is first and foremost to provide a safe environment for our kids, then it's not just whichever particular minority is being targeted in that moment. If we let that slide without setting an expectation of like, hey, here's why that doesn't work in my room, then that's not just saying, hey, Muslim kids aren't safe here. It's every kid that really kid's to stick out for something now sees the potential that they're going to be gone after for that. So, like, even if you don't know how, trying to start so the kids can see, hey, I care, I'm trying to provide something safe, and then educating yourself so that you can do it better and better. But I think you got to start somewhere, and early and often.
Yes, yeah. In the school that I work in, it's not happening now, but a few years back we had some families who were Wiccan, and some of those families were very upset about just the thought of people, even the thought of people talking about any kind of religion in the classroom, even if it was just at lunchtime, two teachers talking about Sunday school, and it was a really interesting discussion that ended up being had, and it came down to, we couldn't do a lot of different things, but thinking about those minority religions like Wiccan and some of these other things, like you said, you have to make the kids feel safe, but how do we accomplish that when it's something we don't understand at all in the first place?
And this, they talked a lot of the readings kind of made me realize, like, the things you do unintentionally, like microaggressions or like things like that. And it says, like Laura was saying, a lack of teacher response can be viewed as like a microaggression in and of itself to students. And then they also talked, I think it was in the podcast, about like not making kids talk speak for their entire religion or culture. And again, like totally unintentionally, but I know I've done that to kids of like, oh, hey, why don't you share your ideas? And so I think it's awareness in basically just recognizing that you have to make an effort, but be conscious of what kind of effort you're making to make sure that you're not isolating kids, but rather making them feel safe.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So our last question.
Way to establish. You go ahead.
Are you sure? We have 3 minutes left.
Yes.
And you're I go with this one. Okay. How can educators thwart negative stereotypes about students with diverse identities?
Well, one of the suggestions that I saw in one of the articles somewhere that I thought was interesting, and I don't know where this would fit in my subject area. That's kind of something I was thinking about. I was like, where does this fit in my curriculum? When would I teach this in my class? But it said to not teach about individual groups of people or religions as isolated things. So you shouldn't be teaching kids about like these religions that don't intersect whatsoever. So if you're talking about something that affects Christians and Muslims, talk about both perspectives together, like bring in as many at the same time as subject as you can, instead of presenting them as completely isolated things. So I feel like that would move over into like the culture of the school as well. Students can feel like how everything connects together instead of like totally isolated groups of people.
That was the Ramarajan and Ronell one, I think.
Yeah, one of the last ones.
Holistic way idea.
Yeah, yes, that was.
And one of the reasons also, I know they mentioned something about one of the reasons they mentioned something about having our religion of the world, so they can deal with the different religions. So I think incorporating or implementing a religion of the world class at a secondary and even middle school level would be great to deal with those stereotypes. I think that is needed because that is a very touchy subject.
Yes, it is.
Religion and the other stereotypes. Yes.
Right, and that article said that the purpose of that class or that course would be to show that Christianity is not the basis of everything, that it all goes together and we have different perspectives besides just the Christian white ideal.
Right.
One thing that really stuck out to me really quickly was, I think it was in the podcast maybe, but it said, don't show you care about students by lowering standards.
Yes.
So again, those students, there are different ways to achieve the same goal, and those can look different for different students, but making sure that you hold all students to the same standard, I think, can help with those negative stereotypes.
Yeah. So that was in the article about immigrants and refugee students, and that's so important. You know, as a special ed teacher, I'm not going to lower my expectations of my kids based on their diagnosis